Hello, everybody. This is Jennifer Matarese, and before I get started on the episode today, I'd just like to take care of the usual housekeeping. For starters, paid requests are now reopened. If you're interested in submitting a disaster request, please double-check the list of requests I most recently posted to the podcast's Facebook and Tumblr accounts to make sure your request has not already been made. Also, please look through past episodes to verify I haven't already covered the disaster in question. To submit a request, you can send a donation of $30 or more to the podcast PayPal at disasteraria@mail.com, on Venmo at Disaster Area Podcast, or on Cash App at Disaster Area Pod. Just add the name of the disaster to the notes on your donation. If you have an idea for an episode subject but you're not sure if it qualifies, feel free to message me and I can approve one way or another, and I usually do. The subject from this particular episode was chosen by M, and I'd like to thank them for the request and for the donation. And I'd also like to issue a note that I will be getting to the second part of the Cutter incident episode as soon as possible, but I want to get it right. It's very complicated, lots of science stuff, so, we want to be very detailed there. Make sure that everybody can understand it. If you'd still like to help support the podcast, you can do so with a one-time donation through PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App, or on a per-episode basis through Patreon at www.patreon.com/disasterareapodcast. A per-episode donation of even as little as $1 an episode can help me do things like pay the rent and keep the lights on. And if you do join the Patreon, you will get new episodes ad-free as soon as I record them, rather than waiting until they are released. So if you do become a patron, I would very much appreciate it. And if you don't become a patron, if you could do me the favor of just listening to the ads that are playing before and after the episode, it helps me get money so that I can help keep the lights on and pay the rent, basically. You can also follow the podcast on Facebook at Disaster Area Podcast, on Instagram at Disaster Area Pod, and on Tumblr at Disaster Area-podcast. Also, please think about rating and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen to us. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, anywhere like that. And as always, the sources for each new episode can be found at disasterareapodcast.wordpress.com and in the episode description wherever you might be listening to me. And as per usual, with all episodes about mass shootings, the name of the shooter will be used only once in this episode, and no more. I will also issue a trigger warning for some swearing in the shooter's social media posts. The sources for this episode include the official report for the shooting from the Ventura County District Attorney, TikTok videos from Shannon_McGee, and the official Borderline Bar account, as well as articles from People Magazine, Relevant, NPR, and the Los Angeles Times, videos from ABC7, CBS This Morning, U.S. News and World Report, and the shooter's own social media accounts. With all of that taken care of, thank you very much for listening, and welcome to Disaster Area. Episode 255, The Borderline Bar and Grill Shooting. November 7th, 2018. 13 deceased, 16 injured. June is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, as anyone who doesn't want to celebrate Pride but already knows veterans already get lots of months and days to themselves will tell you on social media. I joke, but men's mental health is no laughing matter. It is easier in American society and in other societies for women to step up and say they need help, they need mental health support, they need therapy and meds and a good goddamn break every so often. But in a society where men are expected to tough it out, men can be going through all sorts of awful mental issues and not feel able to say, I need help. 3 simple words, and they can't say it. There's a running joke on social media that men will do anything but go to therapy, usually when men are doing something silly or ridiculous. But that joke has a basis in reality. And when that mental health issue goes untreated, the results can be disastrous. If there's one thing you can count on in the United States, it's that no matter where you go, regardless of the type of community you're visiting, you're bound to find a country-themed restaurant or bar. Doesn't matter where you go, you will find one. In Thousand Oaks, California, 40 miles to the northwest of Los Angeles, that bar was the Borderline Bar and Grill. The Borderline popped up at a fortuitous spot, near enough to at least 4 different colleges full of students who found the drinks and line dancing an enticing good time. You're a college student, you like country music, you just want to go out, dance, enjoy yourself with your friends. Lots of people love to go to the Borderline. The Borderline Bar and Grill sat in a parking lot alongside a plaza filled with doctors' offices and medical services. To the north stretched what is labeled as Ventura Freeway and also as the Screaming Eagles Highway. So those of you in Southern California, please forgive me if it's one or the other, but that is what it's labeled when you look it up on on Google Maps and Apple Maps, I believe, both of them. And to the south wound the snaking Rolling Oaks Drive, separating the bar and its neighbors from a cozy suburban neighborhood. It literally is in this little patch of commercial buildings, and then there's the highway, and then over on the other side is a bunch of other commercial buildings, and then to the south is just little suburban neighborhoods, just homes that are all pools and bicycles in the driveway and things like that. Just to the west was South Moore Park Road, which led to strip malls and shopping centers to the north. But for the most part, the Borderline kept on its side of a busy highway, within walking distance of family homes for anyone who wanted to go out for a drink at night, but would rather walk there and back. So there were a lot of different people who like to come to the Borderline. It was a very popular place. A series of steps right up to the alcove just outside the front entrance led up to the alcove just outside the front entrance of the Borderline Bar at the southern side of the building. These steps and sidewalks were like terraces. You'd go up to one and then you'd go up to another. There were a couple of them. After entering through the front door of the building of the Borderline Bar and Grill, you would see a horseshoe-shaped bar in front of you, kind of pointed with the opening toward the dance floor off to your right, and a square set of glass countertops directly to your right. That's where the cashier was. You would purchase tickets, pay fees, or buy bar-related merch, I guess. It was that kind of an area. Just past this area would be a door which opened into the office at the front of the building. This office, when you would go into it, you'd have that set of countertops, walk around the countertops, go into that office, and that office was in that corner at the front of the building. So when you were walking into the building, that wall right there, right next to you, was the side of the office. Now, let me see, where are we? We are right here. That office had like I said, there was the doorway you'd walk through, and even if you didn't walk through, you could see that there were these very large monitors displaying what was being recorded on security cameras that were at multiple areas around the bar. There was one that was pointing into the office. There was one that was outside pointing at the steps. There was one that was inside pointing at the front entrance. Like there's multiple cameras that you can see on those monitors if you are inside that office. As for the bar itself, that horseshoe-shaped bar was separated from the dance floor by an area marked storage on a diagram of the bar that led to an attic area. Basically, you had that bar, and then there's this brick structure in the middle with a door. It's the kind of place that I guess, you would keep booze and that sort of thing. And then it led up to a place that was an attic area with air conditioning and that sort of thing. And then on the other side of that, you had the dance floor. Big open space, wooden floor. I mean, you have to have a wooden floor at a place like this. So you're wearing cowboy boots, you can stomp and make a lot of noise while you're doing line dancing. Along the far wall and the wall to your right would be these tables with seating. So you've got them lined up across the way from you and off to your right, just past the office. And then all the way against the far wall on your right is a stage for any performers who might be there to sing or play music. Now, just to the south of that stage, closer to the wall that you are, was a setup for a DJ. And behind that area would be the entrance to the bar's kitchen, which kind of cupped around the southeastern corner of the building. It was this this little thing that stuck out, but it was the corner of the building, basically. From the outside of the building, it wasn't really rectangular. There's like, things that you have to go around and stuff like that, and it kind of looks a little bit patchwork, a little bit like things were stuck together like Legos, that kind of a thing. Meanwhile, on the left side of the bar and grill, when you entered, you could find the restrooms immediately off to your left, with a large American flag hanging on the western wall, wood paneled, just like the rest of them were. A lot of wood paneling and windows. It was a really well-lit place, a really, nice place to go. Felt country. Just past that, near the northwestern corner of the building, was an exit which led to the patio area for the bar. Now, there was more than one exit. Like, I always tell people, when you go into a place that you don't know, just kind of look around for the extra exits, because there's always another exit aside from the one for the front entrance. The kitchen's always a good bet. In this particular case, you had one for the patio. There were others as well, as I understand it. So it's always a good idea to look for those other places, just for safety's sake. November 7th, 2018 was not quite as busy as it could have been in the Borderline Bar and Grill. It was country college night or college country night. I've seen it referred to both ways. But it was also a Wednesday, and only about 175 people were knocking back drinks at the bar and tables throughout the building. So maybe it was going to get busier later on, but 175 people is not bad. It's just, you see videos from inside the bar and it seems like there could be more people in there. For a while, the dance floor was practically empty, save for a few enthusiastic stalwarts stomping their cowboy boots on the wooden floor. People were celebrating birthdays with their friends and bobbing their heads along with the music, which, not all country. There were a lot of popular, like pop bands, pop music being played, dance music, EDM, house, that kind of thing. So it's not all country. It isn't all country. It is country themed, but they weren't only just playing that. Altogether, a good time, even if the place wasn't exactly packed from one side to the other. Those inside the bar included students from colleges and universities not that far away, like California Lutheran University. One of those students who was in the bar that night was 18-year-old Pepperdine University student Aliana Housley. Aliana. I think it's Aliana. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it, but I believe it's Aliana Housley, whose aunt was Tamara Mowry Housley, one of the twin sisters who starred in Sister Sister back in the 90s. Blake Dingman and Jake Dunham were best friends, both 21 years old, and presumably ready to line dance along with whatever the DJ decided to spin that night. That night, there were two men in the bar who had survived a horrifying tragedy just over a year earlier that we have previously covered on the podcast. Former Marine Brendan Kelly was one of Quadruplets and his friend Telemachus Orphanus, who had spent a couple of years in the Navy himself. They were both military. There were a lot of people in the bar, usually, and especially that night, who were either vets or were members of the military. So a lot of people who had that background. Kelly and Orphanos had both attended the Route 91 Harvest Festival in Las Vegas, Nevada on October 1st, 2017. That night in Vegas, Orphanos used his Navy experience to take care of the wounded, packing the flesh where bullets had slammed into victims and left hideous injuries. Brendan Kelly actually had a tattoo in memory of those lost in Las Vegas, imprinted on his inner upper left arm. It's the Route 91, road sign. That was what it was. Orphanos now worked as a security guard for the Borderline, but this was his night off, and he just wanted to stay there and enjoy it with his friends. After all, the Route 91 Harvest Festival had been traumatic for everyone involved, and here in the Borderline, country music fans could feel safe that something that destructive wouldn't happen again. In a photo taken at about 11 that night, 11 friends crowded together to remember the moment, standing in front of the American flag on the west side wall. Orphanos and Kelly are two of the 11 people in the picture. It says 10 people, maybe 11. It's there's a lot of people crammed into this picture, basically. It's one of those pictures that you took with your friends in your 20s when you would go to a bar. Like 20 of you would squeeze together to get into this picture. 6 men stand in the photo. Army vet Garrett Gratland and his handlebar mustache in the center. Telemachus Orphanos to Gratland's right, wearing a black cap and holding up a beer. Brendan Kelly all the way on the viewer's right, smiling as he also holds up a beer. Kelly's memorial tattoo from the Las Vegas shooting is seen emerging from underneath the short sleeve of his t-shirt. On the viewer's far left is Justin Meek, a large bearded guy holding a 40-ounce can of beer and giving the viewer a friendly smile. He looks jovial. He looks jolly. He looks friendly. He's not like, he's built like a big guy, but he's also got a really great smile. Justin Meek was arguably as much of a representative of the Borderline as the owners or manager. He worked there, spent a lot of his time there, and prior to the photo had been at a meeting helping to plan the Borderline's Christmas party that year. His little sister was also in the bar. She was off somewhere else, promoting for the bar for pay, the same as Justin did. Down to the front, to the viewer's right in the photo, 4 girls are kind of scooched together to grin at the camera. All of them are wearing sleeveless tank tops, short shorts, and one presumes a good pair of cowboy boots for dancing. If you see any videos or any pictures from the Borderline, this is the uniform. This is the uniform if you are a, young woman who's going to the bar to go line dancing, short shorts, tank top, cowboy boots. That's the uniform. In front of the group, a man who's clearly the clown in his crowd of friends stretches across the front of the group, held up by Garrett Gratland, a contemplative finger pressed to his lips. He's, kind of looking coy and silly. These are all just, they're normal guys and girls, just the sort of group you'd love to hang out with at any bar if you were that age. Shortly after the photo was taken, Brendan Kelly headed to the dance floor to, do a little line dancing. And Garrett Gratland went to the bar to grab a beer and a grilled cheese sandwich. He tucked half of the greasy sandwich into his shirt pocket, and he was being recorded by one of his friends at the time, and he said, "I'll just keep this safe from you guys." And, he's joking into the camera. According to the recording on the phone, the video, that time was 11:16 p.m. So it's 11:16 p.m. Nice night. Everybody's having a good time. Everybody's a little buzzed from their beers. Getting ready to dance. Good time. 2 minutes later, a man shoved through the front doors of the Borderline Bar and Grill dressed in black. On his person, he carried a .45 caliber Glock 21 SF semi-automatic pistol with a laser sight he had attached. I've seen also that he attached a flashlight to the front of the gun. Multiple high-capacity magazines with something like 190 bullets. A folding knife, and about 10 smoke bombs. He was armed to go up against a deadly predator, so of course the very first person he targeted was Christina Morissette, the woman working the counter off to his right. Very, very threatening. As gunshots echoed through the bar, the music played by the DJ screeched to a halt. Now those gunshots were the only music to be heard. The shooter fired indiscriminately throughout the bar, the patrons of which quickly ducked for cover or made a run for safer areas. He pointed toward those on the dance floor, amongst whom was Brendan Kelly. Kelly quickly urged nearby women down towards the ground and then shielded one with his own body. At the bar, Garrett Gratland ordered those around him to run to the patio door on the west side of the building. They had kind of crouched for a second, and then they kind of realized, okay, we need to make a run for it. And so they ran for that door as quickly as possible. A video taken from inside the bar at the moment the shooter began firing was shared on ABC7 and is labeled as originally being posted by Dallas Knapp on @Mr.Knapp on Instagram. In the video, the person filming appears to take cover near the empty dance floor. The bar is dark except for the colorful lights above the dance floor. Seconds into the video, someone holding what looks like a weapon can be seen emerging from an area across the dance floor from the person filming. It is a lot like that scene in Signs where the alien just crosses the alley, and just all of a sudden, when the person filming, who I imagine is Dallas Knapp, when he rises up to record what's going on, you don't see anybody. You see nobody in this bar. You don't hear anybody, nothing. And what you see is, out of like a lighted area, is a person emerge from the left. You see just their head, the silhouette of their head, and a gun, what is clearly a gun. There's nothing else it can be. And at that point, Mr. Knapp drops down again. The person, like I said, holding the camera immediately ducks out of view, and the shot goes dark. There are no sounds of screaming or crying. Nobody is saying a word, but there is the repeated sound of gunshots. It sounds like a baseball hitting a metal garbage can, or the loud bang of dropping something from a roof. It's just that bang, 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 just constant for a little bit. The person filming rises up again after a few seconds, and when no shots are fired in his direction, the person filming makes a run for it. He bursts through an emergency exit, his feet pounding on the pavement, and you're just seeing exactly what you expect from somebody who's running with their camera still recording. It's just this, back and forth, thump, thump, thump. You can hear him breathing hard, and he yells something that sounds like he's coming out this door. Now people can be heard yelling in the distance. You can hear people yelling like farther away, not very close, but there are people yelling now. One advantage the people inside the borderline possessed that terrifying night was that the walls were lined with large windows. Almost immediately, people started breaking them, or attempting to, with their hands, with their fists, pounding on them with bar stools, with their own bodies. One man, Matt Wennerstrom, had pulled as many people as he could from under nearby tables. He's kind of just grabbing people and just pulling them under tables. Now, with a break in the gunfire, he grabbed a bar stool, he breaks a window, and he starts helping people out that window. He gets about 3 dozen people out that way, about 33 dozen. I mean, he gets a lot of people out of that building. The ground outside could be a good 10 or 20 feet down, depending on which window we're talking about, but it was better than staying in the bar. Some of those who leapt out immediately turned around to help down women who were dressed for partying in a country bar, not climbing through broken windows with shards of glass sticking out and, trying to jump down 10 to 20 feet. Like I said, the uniform is short denim shorts, a shirt with short sleeves, and a pair of cowboy boots. Not exactly the kind of outfit that you want to climb out a window in. And a lot of people who were injured, they were getting cuts from the glass. I'm sure a lot of those were women who were, in that outfit. There was a slight problem with attacking the borderline, at least if you were a mass shooter intent on killing many without confrontation from anyone. Borderline was a popular bar, not just with college students, but with veterans and cops. Exactly the sort of people who'd attempt a run at a mass shooter firing into a crowd. 48-year-old Sean Adler, who worked as a bouncer along with owning his own coffee shop in Simi Valley, rushed at the gunman. So too did Marine vet Dan Manrique, who ran back into the bar from outside in the parking lot as soon as he heard the shots. Justin Meek shielded others from bullets with his body so they could make their own escape. Telemachus Orfanos led others outside that came back in to go at the shooter. He took multiple shots, then received a stab to the neck with the shooter's folding knife. All 4 men lost their lives that night. There's an argument to be made that sometimes a better option is to run than to attack. For some, even those with military or law enforcement experience, the better solution was to get as many people out of that bar as possible and remove the shooter's options in terms of targets. 22-year-old Navy hopeful Cody Kaufman made it his own mission to get his friends out of the building, and he did. But he couldn't stop there and went back to rescue whomever else he could. He didn't get far before one of the perpetrator's bullets struck him in the head. He collapsed to the floor and died, having bravely protected others. Still, people hid inside the bar instead of running out. 7 people crammed their way into the attic alongside the air conditioners, along with another 7 people who had gone into an employee restroom that did not have a lock on the door, but there were like 3 people standing against the door to hold it closed. Outside, Brendan Kelly was focused on using the EMT training he'd received in the previous year since he'd survived the Las Vegas shooting to treat the injured. He'd felt after that he wanted to do something, he wanted to learn something to kind of, something that he could be useful in a situation like this. You don't want to think it's going to happen again, but if it does, you're prepared. And so he did have EMT training. He moved from one person to another doing what he could. For one person who'd gotten a bad cut from the broken glass in the windows, Kelly removed his own belt and used it to tie a tourniquet around the person's arm. The buckle on the belt was another memorial to his previous experience with mass shootings, engraved with the words Route 91. As all of this was going on, 2 California Highway Patrol officers, Lydia Espinoza and Todd Barrett, were performing a traffic stop not far away on South Moore Park. I want to say Moore Park. It's Discworld popping into my head, I guess. Their timing, it turned out, was impeccable. As they stood there dealing with someone who was about to consider it their lucky day, customers who'd run out of the borderline to escape the shooting raced their way. Spotting the 2 cops, the survivors told them some guy was in the borderline shooting everyone. The 2 officers let the stopped driver go on without getting his ticket. Thank you very much. And Espinoza and Barrett drove in their police unit over to the bar, with Barrett telling dispatch, quote, reports of shots fired at borderline. Soon enough, another officer arrived at the scene. Ventura County Sheriff's Sergeant Ron Heelis. Heelis had been on the force for 29 years, and like the doomed character in an action movie, he was this close to retiring from the force. 3 decades earlier, he'd proposed to his wife at dinner in the same exact building in which the Borderline Bar and Grill now inhabited. I don't know if it was the Borderline itself. I don't think so, but it was another restaurant, and I guess he slipped the ring into her bag when she went to the bathroom, and so she goes through her purse and, look, it's a ring, and she goes back to the table, and then he proposed. So now he was heading into that same building to stop an armed gunman. He and Espinoza and Barrett, they meet up. They decide they're going to head in because he is a sergeant. Heelis takes the lead. As with most mass shootings, the officers approaching the site of the incident had no clue who was a threat and who was not. Sergeant Heelis and officers Barrett and Espinoza raced toward one man in the parking lot and ordered him to show them his hands, only for Garrett Gratlin to hold up his hands and say, "I'm not your guy." He'd already taken his friends to the nearby Shell station at the corner, but he'd wanted to come back to help, so he had run back to the building to assist in any way that he could. By now it was 11:26, 8 minutes since the shooter entered the borderline. Sergeant Heelis and officers Barrett and Espinoza approached the front door of the Borderline Bar in that order. Just Sergeant Heelis first, officers Barrett, and then Espinoza at the back. And they were spread out about 15 feet or so. So when Sergeant Heelis makes it to the top of the steps outside the bar, Officer Espinoza is at the bottom, and Officer Barrett is about halfway up. And they are moving along this series of steps and walkways between the parking lot and the front door, kind of moving up one bit at a time. It's like a video game. You're trying to move to the front door and you have to go up some steps and then on a sidewalk and then up some steps and on a sidewalk. It's when you see it in video, it is very clear that this is an area where at the very least they would be able to take cover if they could, but also it's kind of open in certain ways. Like there are places to take cover, but when you're walking up to the front of that building, you are walking up these steps, and if that shooter decides to, just peer out the door and fire at you, he can do that. Sergeant Heelis announced body down at the door, then asked if the man lying there was okay. On security footage, he doesn't appear to respond. You can't hear anything, and I don't see any like identification of who this specific person was. This was in the Ventura County Sheriff's report. I'm sorry, the District Attorney report. It doesn't identify the victims themselves. It focuses on the officers and what they did in this particular section. And so it doesn't say who's there, who's outside on that front, right outside the entrance. I would assume it is either Dan Manrique, who ran up from the parking lot, or Sean Adler, who was the bouncer that night. Security cameras show Sergeant Heelis stepping inside the front entrance, calling out Sheriff's Department. He waved his weapon from side to side, the light attached to it skimming through the darkness looking for victims or for the gunman himself. The camera facing that door is off to Sergeant Heelis's right and up above. So it's looking down on him. And the counter is right there. So presumably behind that counter is Christina Morissette lying on the ground. The shooter was at a distinct advantage to the officers approaching the front door. He had access to the security cameras, and he could see the officers approaching on that large monitor in the office. He was in the office. He had the lights off. And if you watch the video, all you can see in terms of light is kind of reflections off of that monitor and off of his cell phone, because he keeps checking his cell phone. God forbid you stop checking social media while you're doing something like this. So as they came closer to the front door, the perpetrator readied himself near the office door on the other side of the counter. When Sergeant Heelis entered the front entrance, the shooter immediately began to fire. Outside, you have Officer Espinoza and Officer Barrett, who retreat. Officer Espinoza goes down several flights of steps. She goes down to a lower area. Officer Barrett is in an area that is down another set of steps, I believe, and, within sight of the door. Sergeant Heelis moved backward through the door, and at some point he kind of trips as he's going out and falls to the ground. So he's kind of crawling, scrambling out, getting out of the building. During all of this, Heelis took 5 shots from the perpetrator. The shooter stepped behind the counter, and he fired through the window to the left of the entrance, just over that side of the counter. So if you are behind that counter, right next to the door, and there is, let's say the cashier is like right there, standing on that side at the door where you can pay. There is a window off to her left. And that's the window that he fired through to fire at the 3 police officers outside. Sergeant Heelis moves down the steps, and he ends up down and off to the left of the steps. When you are like facing them, he's off to the left. And at this point, he's kind of out of view of Officer Barrett. As all of this is going on, I skipped. Okay, behind Heelis, down the steps, and behind the cover of some bushes, Officer Barrett fired back at the window and entrance, hoping to hit the shooter. Like I said, he's got a clear line of sight to the door. As he's doing this, however, Sergeant Heelis rose to his feet, and one of Barrett's shots struck Heelis in the side. And Heelis collapses right there. As all of this was going on, other law enforcement entities were approaching and arriving at the borderline, including a SWAT team and a negotiator. As happens in so many of these cases, the police could only go off on what witnesses who'd escaped the borderline had seen, and those stories were understandably confused and at cross purposes. People in different locations see different things. Some of them didn't see the shooter, some saw the shooter, some thought they saw 2 shooters. Like, the way that things were, it's very confusing. In a situation like this, it's very hard to get a straight story from witnesses. They're very confused and they are very emotional. And so the officers that are approaching the scene are, they're bringing everything that they have. Meanwhile, outside the bar, you have Officer Espinoza, who is down at the very bottom of the steps at the parking lot. You have Officer Barrett, who is still, seeking cover down by these one set of steps. And then you have Sergeant Heelis, who is down near the front entrance. But he is still firing up to a certain point towards the shooter. So he's still making an effort to try and stop the shooter. Inside the office, the perpetrator set off one of his smoke grenades and pitched it out the door of the office. Now, he had thrown several of these already into the bar itself. In video from inside the dark office, he can be seen leaning against the back wall. Like, he's leaning like you would if you were, it's college, you're in class, you decide, I gotta go to the bathroom. You grab your phone, you go to the bathroom, the restroom. It's a one-person restroom, and the door is closed. Okay, so now I have to wait out here. I'm gonna lean back against the wall and just kind of check my messages, check my email, check Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, whatever it is you want to check. You're just doing that. And that's what he was doing in this video. He just looks like a casual person, like somebody who is not shooting up a bar. As he is doing this, he's scrolling through social media, and at this time, he posts to Facebook and Instagram, like you do in the middle of a crime spree, just like anybody would do. At 11:24 p.m., he posted the following, quote, "It's too bad I won't get to see all the illogical and pathetic reasons people will put in my mouth as to why I did it. Fact is, I had no reason to do it, and I just thought, fuck it, life is boring, so why not?" Close quotes. 3 minutes later, he posted again. Open quotes, "I hope people call me insane," and then 2 smiley face emojis. Wouldn't that just be a big ball of irony? Yeah, I'm insane, but the only thing you people do after these shootings is hopes and prayers, or keep you in my thoughts every time, and wonder why these keep happening. And then there's 2 more smiley face emojis. End quote. As he stood there in the darkened office, something happened which has happened before in other mass shootings. During the Camden Walk of Death in 1949, which I still haven't covered, and during the school shooting which inspired the song I Don't Like Mondays, which I also haven't covered yet. The phone rang. Not his personal cell phone, but the phone to the bar rang. Someone was calling the borderline. The shooter could have just let the phone ring or picked it up and then immediately dropped it back down and hung up. Like, he didn't have to answer the phone. That was not his job. But instead, he picked it up and he held it to his ear. In the other 2 cases, the person on the phone had been a reporter, taking a chance that they might get to speak to a killer before the police did. Ask him what he's doing. Ask them why they're shooting things. That's where they get, I don't like Mondays. The reporter asks the shooter in that particular case why she's doing it. I don't like Mondays. This lightens up the week or something like that. In this particular case, the shooter heard a worried woman's voice on the phone. Her daughter had been in the bar and had gotten out. But were there others in the bar who needed help? She wanted to know. But she was coy about it. She wasn't straightforward about it, as far as I can tell. She wasn't saying, I know you're the shooter. Can you tell me what's going on? She may not have known it was the shooter. It's kind of unclear, the accounts as to what she said and that sort of thing. She said, "Are you guys open today?" And he said, "What?" Not in that tone of voice, but what? Like that. This time, she asked when closing hours were that night. He didn't respond at that point. He simply hung up on her. But it was kind of, I guess, on her part, a test to see what was going on there, because she knew full well at this point that something was going on at the borderline. It had been 15 minutes or so since the shooter first fired on the officers entering the bar. At this point, he had not been injured, none of the officers' bullets having hit him. The perpetrator sat down on the floor, maybe tired, maybe burned out of all of his anger, maybe just done with whatever he planned to do. Taking the handgun in hand, the shooter placed the barrel under his chin. The ensuing shot definitively ended the massacre at the borderline at 11:39 p.m. It had been 21 minutes since he first walked into the bar. 13 people died after a shooter armed with a handgun and smoke bombs entered the Borderline Bar and Grill on November 7th, 2018. The dead included church-going Noel Sparks, busboy Mark Meza Jr., Telemachus Orphanos, Justin Meeks, cashier Christina Morissette, Sean Adler, Cody Kaufman, Dan Manrique, Aliana Housley, best friends Blake Dingman and Jake Dunham, the shooter himself, and Sergeant Ron Heelis. Out of the deceased, at least half either made some sort of attempt to stop the shooter or were reported to have saved the lives of others before they lost their own. It's entirely possible the death toll could have been so much higher, but inside the bar that night were multiple military members from different branches, as well as at least 8 off-duty police officers. It's also entirely possible the level of resistance he faced inside the borderline led the shooter to give up before he could fire off the rest of the bullets he carried, instead ending his own life after firing all of the contents of only 2 of the 7 magazines he carried. About 5 minutes after the perpetrator ended his own life, law enforcement would make a move on the front entrance of the Borderline Bar, only retrieving Sergeant Heelis at this point. They picked him up and carried him away. Garrett Gratland was still there, and he helped load Sergeant Heelis into an SUV, which rushed the officer to the nearest hospital. Another 7 minutes passed before the authorities made a second attempt to enter the building. They found 11 of the deceased in the building, including the perpetrator, and one just below the windows by the south side of the dance floor, presumably not far from the entrance given the diagrams of the bar. Another 19 survivors were found inside the building. 7 in the attic, 7 in the bathroom. There was a busboy hiding under a sink. There were people still hiding inside that building. And so they have to go in there, the officers, and clear the entire building. And that can take a while. So they could be hiding for a good long while. It would later be determined and announced a month after the massacre that of all the shots Sergeant Ron Heelis took, the one which ended his life was not even fired by the perpetrator. During the firefight, Heelis was struck by a bullet from the weapon of Officer Todd Barrett behind him. The perpetrator hit Heelis 5 times, all of which doctors said he could have survived. But Barrett's sole bullet traveled through Heelis' chest into his heart and delivered a fatal blow. The officer in question wasn't punished given the shot was friendly fire, and if the shooter hadn't taken his life, he would have also faced a murder charge for the death of Sergeant Heelis, despite him not being the one to fire the fatal shot. This has happened before in other crimes of this nature, where the person in question is not the one who ends up shooting or harming a police officer who responds to the scene, but that police officer dies in another way, and because they die while fighting somebody who is committing a crime, the person who committed the crime gets to take the blame for that. So that didn't stop Officer Barrett from taking some much needed time off to deal with his grief and remorse. Understandably, Officer Barrett felt profound sadness at being the one to strike Sergeant Heelis and to take his life. And that was a complete accident. That was not his fault. That was entirely the perpetrator's fault. And it doesn't, you can tell, I'm sure you can tell Officer Barrett that, and he may have been working through that the past few years since this occurred, but it's one of those things that I imagine dwells in him quite a lot. The perpetrator of the Borderline Bar and Grill shooting would later be revealed as 28-year-old Ian David Long. Much like so many of the other people inside Borderline that night, the perpetrator had a military background, an Afghanistan war vet with training as a machine gunner. The shooter was not new to violent outbursts. In fact, according to CBS This Morning, in his senior year of high school, he physically assaulted his female track coach, Dominique Colell, but no charges were ever filed. Colell stated in an interview with CBS This Morning that, quote, "There are hundreds of thousands of people with PTSD. They don't go around shooting people. This kid was mentally disturbed in high school," end quote. The shooter was no stranger to the borderline. He'd been there many times before, just like so many other veterans in the area. One of his friends, Todd Stratton, had gone with him there before and was there that night with some other buddies when he burst in, firing at will. According to Stratton, he said, "My friend killed my other friends." I don't know exactly which of his friends were among the dead, but it's got to be really, really hard to be in a place like that and to go through all of that and to lose friends and then to find out later on that one of your own friends was the one who committed this. Several years prior to the shooting, the perpetrator strode into a Simi Valley gun store looking to buy a gun. That was when he purchased the weapon used in the attack, perfectly legal and above board. Still, he didn't possess a permit to carry the weapon in a concealed place, possibly one of the only ways officers could have stopped the shooting prior to that night in November. They could have also gotten him on the high-capacity magazines, whose illegality in California meant a drive over to Nevada to pick them up. That's the thing about the gun laws in America. If you don't live here, the gun laws in different states being different means that you can have really strict gun laws in one state, but they're still dealing with a lot of gun crime and gun murder and gun suicides because people who want to do this sort of thing can just go to another state nearby and get what they want if they can't get it in this state. It's what happens with Chicago. Chicago has a lot of gun crime, but Illinois as a state has a lot of very strict gun laws. However, you can just go across the border into Indiana, which is like right there from Illinois and, from Chicago, and get whatever it is that you want. So there's that to keep in mind. There are two photos of the shooter which appear to feature most prominently in media accounts of the massacre, both pictures in sharp contrast to one another. The first is what appears to be a simple driver's license photo. The shooter unshaven and scruffy, chin tilted up, the man looking down at the camera as though he's better than all of this. Something about the photo, even for something as innocuous as a driver's license photo, is unsettling. He looks really smug and but also angry. There's a lot going on in that photo. And then there's the other photo. The shooter in his military days, standing in an office somewhere, fresh uniform, clean pressed, big smile on his face. He's clean cut, buzz cut, shaved. He actually looks in this photo not even the least bit dangerous. He is handsome. He is smiling. He looks safe. He looks like a sweet kid, maybe the kid next door who'd always come over to help mow your lawn or shovel your driveway. The fact this photo shows up in any stories at all, much less in so many, is reminiscent of when stories of fathers who murder their entire families, like Chris Watts, are accompanied by happy shots of the kids and the mom with the man who would later take their lives. It's this thing that happens a lot with news stories and the media, where they choose pictures that either make people look worse or make them look better compared to what they did. There was another family annihilator. I can't remember which one it was, a husband who killed the rest of his family. And there were pictures of him like jet skiing and smiling and laughing with his family, and he had killed all of them. So this is a real problem that the media has, especially considering that they do this a lot for white men, and then when it's men of a different race, it becomes, even if they do something good, it's like a mugshot or a really bad photo of them, just something that makes them look bad. I went to journalism school for 3 years, and I can never get over the fact that this is a genuine problem, and it has been since I went to journalism school 30 years ago. As it stood, the shooter showed one trait common among mass shooters: violence against women, more specifically his own mother, although, of course, he did attack his coach in high school. In April of the year that the shooting occurred, neighbors called police after hearing a loud argument over at the home that the shooter shared with his mom. It wasn't the first time they'd heard the pair arguing at all, but it was bad enough to warrant a call to 911. People were worried that because of his service in Afghanistan, he might have been suffering from PTSD and that he might attack her. But he got checked out by a mental health specialist, and they said, no, it's fine. He doesn't need to be committed against his will. It's fine. He's okay, which turned out to be not the case. Later, when the police were searching the shooter's home, police would find a note he'd scribbled down before leaving to commit his final act. The note consisted of 2 words, no funeral. The request seemed redundant. After all, who's going to attend? I mean, I'm sure his mom will attend. I'm not sure about anybody else. While no firm reason behind the shooting could be determined, it was theorized that the perpetrator committed the attack on the Borderline Bar and Grill because of his personal contempt for civilians and students, those who didn't serve. It seems that they kind of picked that up from things that he had said on social media, things that he had written down, things like that, but he really hadn't written like a specific reason why he did anything. He didn't write a manifesto or a letter or anything like that. The theoretical motive makes for an odd choice of target, if that's the case. While it was college night at the Borderline, plenty of those who were there were members or former members of the military, some of whom became his victims. As someone who was a frequent enough customer, the shooter should have known that. But perhaps to him, their education trumped their service to the country. It really is unclear. It's not as unclear as, for example, the shooter in Las Vegas, who really left absolutely no sign of the motive for why he did what he did. But in this particular case, it's kind of a supposition based on opinions that he had shared and things like that, that he was doing it because he didn't really like college students or civilians, which seems silly. It seems like a silly reason to attack anybody. But to be fair, every reason to attack people like this in this sort of situation is silly and ridiculous and not worth respecting. As previously mentioned in the episode on the campfire, that wildfire swept through Northern California the very next day, with people in Paradise, California, reading about it in the news in the morning, only to have to drop everything and flee as the wildfire approached their town. But the same thing happened in Thousand Oaks as well, with people nearby needing to leave because of the Woolsey wildfire the day after the shooting. I think this is actually another location where the president visited after he visited Paradise. I'm not sure, but there was a lot going on in California at the time. Following the Borderline Bar and Grill shooting, Brendan Kelly went back to the tattoo parlor to make a few improvements to the memorial tattoo on his left arm. When he left, the tattoo had 2 additions: the names Justin Meek and Telemachus Orphanos above and below the Route 91 sign. Unfortunately, Matt Wennerstrom, the hero who saved around 3 dozen people by helping them escape through a broken window, died February 26, 2022, at the age of 24 years old in a motorcycle accident. With respect for the lives he saved 3.5 years earlier, a car rally held in Wennerstrom's memory attracted hundreds of people in the area who remembered the heroic measures he'd taken that night. He had a very short life, but in the course of that life, he did something amazing that a lot of people may not do under the same circumstances. In a TikTok video by Shannon_McGee on April 23rd, 2020, the isolated structure of the former Borderline Bar can be seen with fallen sticks and dirt on the sidewalks, presumably from storms passing through in the months since the shooting. There had been fences up around the building for obvious reasons in certain areas, and they had come down. The first caption reads, "This is a bar named Borderline, and 1.5 years ago a shooting happened and we lost 12 angels." The next shot is of the person recording the video walking toward the entrance on that same sidewalk with the caption, "There was a fence up around the door and building this whole time until recently, and seeing the door can be triggering for some." At this point, the person recording turns the camera towards the steps to the front entrance, which is boarded up. Wood and tables are propped up against a gap between the wall to the right and the top of the steps leading to the front entrance. Here is where Sergeant Heelis was shot by both the perpetrator and Officer Barrett. The caption now says, "They left it a mess, so we decided to clean it up and make it look nice for our angels and visitors." The final shot is of a canopy over what appears to be some memorial signs and the like, before the camera sweeps to the right to show dozens of white crosses, flowers, balloons, signs, and other memorial gifts placed against this wall outside the closed bar. There was also a line of cowboy boots that each had a teddy bear in it. So, there's a lot of stuff left there to remember the people who were lost. The final caption reads, "Borderline strong," with a heart emoji. There were temporary memorials for a while, as there always are with these sorts of shootings, but a permanent one was dedicated on the 1-year anniversary of the shooting. Located in Conejo Creek North Park at the Lakeside Pavilion, this healing garden, as it was called, features large stones set into the ground near the small lake at the park. It looks from satellite pictures to be a very lovely place to go and just kind of, be quiet and contemplative and mourn those who were lost. Within 2 years, the owners of the Borderline Bar and Grill had reopened the bar, albeit in a new venue and location. The BL Dance Hall and Saloon can be found in Agora Hills, less than 15 minutes on a good day, along the Ventura Freeway to the east of the original site of the bar. On its TikTok account at Borderline Bar,